Hare, sorry, Winter? Hare Krishna. Good to have you. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradhayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Tushe Namaha Vanchakalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So last week we got up to verse 24 in the 7th chapter. So in this section, starting from verse 20, Krishna has spoken about a class of people who do not surrender to Krishna, largely because they don't have knowledge about him. Those who take shelter of the Devatas to fulfill their desires, they were spoken of as people whose knowledge has been taken away, Ritagyana. And they were spoken of as Alpa Buddhaya, people of small intelligence or a narrow-minded intelligence. Another term that Prabhupada sometimes used to describe these individuals is Kripana, a miser, one who's not broad-minded enough to learn to use the wealth of human life properly. And then he describes in these verses knowledge that would bring these souls closer to him. He says that it is actually because of me that such individuals have faith in such demigods. Because of me that the demigods are able to provide results to people. And if somebody who is worshipping the demigods knows this, then they can approach Krishna directly. In verse 24, Krishna speaks about another class of people who do not take shelter of him. These are the impersonalists. And he calls them abuddhaya, people who have no intelligence whatsoever. At least in the case of the demigods, they understand that there's a personality that sits behind nature. Do you remember how we had gradations of 5 levels of consciousness? At the first level, we had people who just deal with material energy to dominate it. The so-called, we spoke about it in the context of the Panchopasana system. So we had those who begin with worship of Durga, they're typically there to dominate material nature. And then above them are worshippers of Surya, and the level of consciousness that is ascribed to these followers is they deal with material nature, deal harmoniously with material nature. And everybody remember this classification? I think we discussed it sometime in the 4th chapter or something. But both these classes of people, they still deal with energy. Above them are those who flock generally in Vedic culture to the worship of Ganesh, but the level of consciousness ascribed here is they recognize the presence of personality. Behind material energy. Above them are those who flock to worship to Shiva. They understand the presence of an underlying spiritual energy which pervades everything. And in that context, we had discussed why the worship of demigods was considered to be inferior in terms of consciousness. But then ultimately was Vishnu, where they recognized the presence of the Supreme Person behind even spiritual energy. SE stands for spiritual energy. But in this case, the demigod worshippers, who, for example, are just dealing with, the demigod worshippers who deal with personalities that sit behind material energy are called Alpa-buddhaya, and apparently impersonalists are called Abuddhaya. The reason is that these impersonalists are not like Mayavadis, who think that the form of the Lord comes from the impersonal form of the Lord. That's not their conception. They understand that behind the impersonal form of the Lord there is a personality, but they don't fully recognize that. And in the sense that that's not their attraction. They're attached to the underlying spiritual energy. But those who consider that Krishna's form is made of the mode of goodness, that is what many schools of thought suggest. That you have one underlying spiritual energy. From that spiritual energy comes a form which is in the mode of goodness, and they think that's what the Lord is. This is similar to the conception of God the Father, God the Son in Christianity. When you say God the Father, they mean that the Lord doesn't have a form. He just exists, and he has sentiments. He dominates and loves his children. But they say for God to come into this world, he has to take on a material form, and that is their understanding of Jesus Christ, God the Father, God the Son. And then their understanding is that because he provides inspiration to those who take shelter of Jesus Christ, he's also there as a Holy Spirit, that entity, that spirit that pervades everyone and inspires them to act in a guided way. So that's their understanding of God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. It's not a unified understanding. It's kind of a way of putting into place aspects of philosophy to explain things that they have experienced. However, that's similar to that's not the conception here. It's similar to the conception mentioned by Krishna here. Those who think that personality comes from just impersonal light, they are not actually intelligent. Because one should always know that you can never get something that is complete from something that is incomplete. When you have the Brahman energy, it doesn't have personality, it doesn't have pastimes. And from Brahman, how can you get personality? How can you get variety? How can you get pastimes? And the principle always is that that the source should have more, and it should complete everything. And should be the source of every other thing that comes from that source. So these people are called Abuddhaya by the Lord. And he says that Param Bhavam Ajananto, they do not know my supreme existence as being imperishable and of the finest quality. So in this purport, Srila Prabhupada says, those who are worshippers of demigods have been described as less intelligent persons, and here the impersonalists are similarly described. Lord Krishna in his personal form is here speaking before Arjuna, and still due to ignorance, impersonalists argue that the Supreme Lord ultimately has no form. Yamunacharya, a great devotee of the Lord in the disciplic succession of Ramanujacharya, has written a very appropriate verse in this connection. He says, "My dear Lord, devotees like Vyasadeva and Narada know you to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Parama Prakrishte. By understanding different Vedic literatures, one can know about your characteristics." This is that phrase, Satvena Satvikataya Prabhales cha Sastre. You can know your characteristics, your form, and your activities, and one can thus understand that you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prakyata Deva Paramartha Vidham. Vidham means know. By studying Shastra, one can know that you, as you stand, are the Paramartha, the supreme object. But those who are in the modes of passion and ignorance, the demons, the non-devotees, they cannot understand you. They are unable to understand you. Naiva Asura Prakritya. So those who have an Asura Prakriti, those who have the mentality or the mood of Asuras, Prabhavanti Bodham, they cannot understand you properly. And then Prabhupada continues, however expert such non-devotees may be in discussing Vedanta and the Upanishads and the other Vedic literatures, it is not possible for them to understand the personality of Godhead. So underlying this verse is a statement that says that people who have this conception have a specific form of envy against the Supreme Lord. For them, there's no result, spiritual or otherwise, that is possible. They remain where they are. And to substantiate this point, Prabhupada quotes 10:14-29 from the Bhagavatam later on in the purport. He says, "My Lord, if one is favored by even a slight trace of the mercy of your lotus feet, atapi means, on the contrary, te deva padam bhujadvaya. If one has, prasada lesha means even a small drop of your mercy, of your two lotus feet, then janati tattvam bhagavan mahimno. They can understand the truth about your greatness. Na cha anyo. The others are not able to understand." So Prabhupada says, but those who speculate to understand the personality of Godhead are unable to know you, even though they continue to study the Vedas for many years. One cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, or his form, quality, name simply by mental speculation or by discussing Vedic literature. One must understand him by devotional service. When one is engaged in Krishna consciousness, beginning by the chanting of the by chanting the Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, then only can one understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Non-devotee impersonalists think that Krishna has a body made of this material nature, and that all his activities, his form and everything are Maya. These impersonalists are known as Mayavadis. They do not know the ultimate truth. It is important to note what Srila Prabhupada says here about the necessity of devotional service being required to understand the Supreme Lord. If we look at the reason for our conditioning in this world, the beginning actually starts. And this is an explanation of why Bhakti is the only path to attain Krishna, why everything else must be mixed with Bhakti to attain anything in this world. Our conditioning in this world starts with avidya. It is sometimes described as ignorance or a misconception of who Krishna is. Questions like, why does Krishna have to be the Supreme Lord? Why do I have to be a servant? Why does Krishna have to be the only master? Why does he have to be the only enjoyer? This doesn't feel right. There are many misconceptions that we carry with us, and we've been carrying these misconceptions from time immemorial. But from this avidya then spawns a sense of turning our back on Krishna. from turning our back on Krishna comes forgetting our spiritual identity. And from forgetting our spiritual identity comes being captivated by Maya. Now the question is, how is this cycle to be stopped? The root cause of our presence in this world is misconception of Krishna. So therefore this chapter stresses proper knowledge of Krishna. How does one acquire proper knowledge of Krishna? Is it something we acquire ourselves, or is it a revelation? It's a revelation. So therefore the cure is of knowledge of Krishna, which is revealed in the heart. How is this knowledge revealed? Shrinvatam svakata Krishna punya shravana kirtana tidi antasto hyabhadrani vidunoti surit satam nashta prayesha bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya. So for those who serve the devotees, for those who serve Srimad Bhagavatam and are willing to hear, in other words, it begins by service. Even with the service of sitting and listening, or sitting and chanting Krishna's names. But to do that, one has to hear. But it's with this principle of service, principally by hearing and chanting. Because it's a revelation, such hearing and chanting invites the Lord's grace. Which the Lord benedicts us by revealing Vedic knowledge in our heart, or knowledge of Himself. When Krishna reveals such knowledge, being pleased by our bhakti, this avidya is removed. So at the beginning of the Bhakti Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami explains, therefore, that bhakti is the only process that can allow us to leave this world. And those who are Mayavadis, or people who think that without bhakti, some other process is sufficient to get them over, they're mistaken. What are the differences between them? Mandabuddhya basically means they have small intelligence, or stunted intelligence. Something like that. It's hard to say this before the deities, but it's like calling someone the word beginning with IMB, or calling someone IDI, etc., whatever that rest of the word is, or calling someone FOOL, something else. You can say, that one word refers to someone with an IQ between 50 and 70. I don't know if anybody's seen those categorizations. Some people have that. But the thing is, it's like saying, some word describes someone with a certain level of IQ, and there's some gradation, but really those words are synonyms and can be used interchangeably. But if you were to strictly put them next to each other, there would be like differences between someone who is an impersonalist and someone who's a demigod worshipper. I think once Prabhupada was asked, who is it who will come to Krishna more quickly? An impersonalist, like a Mayavadi, or a demigod worshipper? And Prabhupada said the demigod worshippers have a better chance. Because they're more innocent. They're just after something material. So they can very easily just be told, okay, just worship Krishna, you'll get the same thing. And they would chant Krishna's names. But Mayavadis have a reluctance to chant Krishna's names because they've been trained to think that these names don't have value. They're just material names, and you can chant anybody's name. Their conception is destructive. But it is only by knowledge of Krishna that we can learn to turn towards Krishna. As much as when we're in a relationship, if I have misconceptions about the other person, then those misconceptions always cause me to turn away. And the only cure for those misconceptions is to turn those misconceptions around. I need to get proper knowledge of that person. And proper knowledge of Krishna comes only with Krishna's grace. So any means that is possible to acquire Krishna's grace is important. Now, Prabhupada would also say that to invite Krishna's grace, there are the principal sense of service, it starts with which sense? Hearing is one thing that Prabhupada says. In another verse, he says the tongue. He says that even though, O Krishna, this verse comes in the nectar of devotion, although you cannot be understood, still you can be understood by devotional service, starting with the tongue. If you vibrate the holy names or you taste prasad, these two means purify one's senses and invoke knowledge of Krishna within one's heart. If we find that we're reading Shastra or we're hearing something and there's some part of it we can't relate to or we can't understand, if we just take our beads and we just chant, we try and chant deeply and attentively, it'll be like it's like a revelation that sits within the heart. I remember I was with my spiritual master once, and he was just asking me how I was. So I described that I'd been going through some emotional. This was 6 months after I joined the ashram. I was going through some emotional fluctuation. Then he said, "Well, what about now?" I said, "Now I'm okay." He said, "Why? What happened?" I said, "I was standing before the deities, and then I suddenly realized I'm actually Krishna's servant, and then I felt like I actually belong here in Krishna's service." And that Krishna doesn't have any motivation in my wanting to be here. It's just that's the relationship. And then I told the spiritual master, I know this is something that we always hear all the time. He said, "No, but it's not like that." He said, "It's like all these points are just there in our head and they're just swirling around." But he said, ever so, at some point, by Krishna's grace, some of these points, they just drop into the heart. And he said, this will happen to you your whole life. And allows us to turn towards him. As much academically qualified as we may be in the Shastras, it's not helpful. It's Krishna actually revealing that knowledge in the heart. And sometimes Prabhupada would also quote the verse. He called it the most important verse in Vedic literature. Yasya deve para bhaktir yata deve tata guru. Tasyeti katata hi artha prakashante bhavana. But one has faith in Krishna and a simple level of faith in the spiritual master, into that faithful person's heart is the import of the Vedic literature revealed. So the beginning is always invoking grace. And when we connect to that particular point, we understand that the entire process actually is the process of requesting Krishna's mercy. And whether we're singing kirtan, whether we are presenting something, whether we are hearing, even the act of sitting in Bhagavatam class and hearing is an act of requesting the devotee's mercy. It's not we would sit there and hear topics intellectually and digest it intellectually. It's more that when we sit there, we invoke the pleasure of the Vaishnavas. Oh, this person is hearing so nicely. This person is actually singing in such a way as to inspire the Vaishnavas to sing and dance. When that becomes the mood with which we perform one of our services, material or spiritual, and the grace allows knowledge of Krishna to enter the heart. And that is Krishna's point. That's Prabhupada's point here. Okay. So text 25, Krishna is going to describe why, or that these people, both the demigod worshippers and the impersonalists, they don't invoke the Lord's grace. Naham prakasha sarvasya yoga maya samavritah mudoyam na bijanati loko mamajam avyayam. Translation.
I'm never manifested foolish and unintelligent. For them I'm covered by my eternal potency. Therefore they do not know that I'm unborn and infallible.
So sometimes the example given, and this comes up in Kunti Devi's praise that Prabhupada quotes later on in the purport, he says, in the praise of Kunti in the Srimad Bhagavatam 1.8.19, it is said that the Lord is covered by the curtain of Yogamaya, and thus ordinary people cannot understand him. So this is the instance where Kunti had just seen Krishna save Parikshit Maharaj in the womb. Suddenly she also realized that he was inside Uttara's womb. protecting Parikshit. That he was outside and inside simultaneously was something she found extraordinary. And her thought was, I've been thinking of you as my nephew all this time, but actually your real personality, your real power is not seen by people. And that's what she's quoting. Maya javanika channam agya dokshadam avyayam. She says, na lakshya se murcha nato natya dharo yata. You appear in front of people just like an actor. Just like an actor, puts on some makeup or a persona, and it appears to them this person, is a bus driver, or this person is, a professional in some profession. They don't see you as a person. And you come here and you play the role of being a nephew. You play the role of being a chariot driver or a teacher or a parent. But actually your actual personality is completely unknown. And Prabhupada also gives the example of the sun. He says that the sun can itself never be covered by a cloud. But by a cloud, which is the creation of the sun, because the sun evaporates water and creates the cloud, our vision of the sun is blocked. The sun is too far away, too high to be blocked by the cloud. But it is our vision that is blocked by the sun's activity. So in that way, those whose inclination is not to take shelter of Krishna, Krishna says, I reserve the right not to present myself before them. Sometimes people will ask, where is God? Show me here before him. I don't see his presence anywhere. And that was Hiranyakashipu's point also. The reality is that it's a process of inviting grace. As much as Prabhupada would say, you can't ask the president to come and be present right before you anytime you like. You have to actually do something to invoke his grace. Similarly, it's the same with Krishna. But for those whose grace is with, those for whom Krishna's grace is present, they see Krishna everywhere at all times. So Prabhupada will say, it may be argued that since Krishna was visible to everyone when he was present on this earth, then how can it be said that he is not manifest to everyone? But actually, he was not manifest to everyone. When Krishna was present, there were only a few people who could understand him to be the supreme personality of Godhead. In the assembly of Kurus, when Shishupal spoke against Krishna's being elected president of the assembly, Bhishma supported him and supported Krishna and proclaimed Krishna to be the supreme God. Similarly, the Pandavas and a few others knew that he was the supreme, but not everyone. He was not revealed to the non-devotees and the common man. Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that but for his pure devotees, all men consider him to be like themselves. He was manifest only to his devotees as a reservoir of all pleasure. But to others, to unintelligent non-devotees, he was covered by his internal potency.
So, just a question. So when everybody saw his universal form, didn't it click?
They thought he was some kind of magician, some kind of powerful yogi. That was the conception. See, this point here is actually very interesting. And this is actually a very deep point. What Prabhupada says is, he was manifest only to his devotees as the reservoir of all pleasure. What that means is that when the devotees experienced transcendental pleasure in their heart, because that experience of transcendental pleasure is practically the only proof of something being beyond this world. It's like when we chant Krishna's names as devotees, there is something different. We've done everything else, but this is different. And devotees experience that. Or when we come before the deities, especially when our consciousness has been saturated with service, we come there and we feel Krishna's presence. Those who apply themselves in Krishna consciousness understand that there is something transcendental here. But when others, particularly those whose vision has been covered, and a strong covering is either because of ignorance or because of offenses. Offenses put a thick fog of cover in front of a person's mind. And thinking Krishna to be impersonal is an offense. When that fog of cover, or that wall is there, they actually don't experience the pleasure bliss that others experience, that devotees experience in Krishna's presence. And because they don't experience that bliss, because that is covered from their vision, they think that Krishna is just an ordinary person. The same experience they have with ordinary people, they have the same experience with Krishna, by Krishna's potency. And that's what Prabhupada means by saying, he was manifest only to his devotees as a reservoir of all pleasure, but to others, to unintelligent non-devotees, he was covered by his internal potency. And in the Rajasuya sacrifice, for example, when Yudhishthira Maharaj was worshipping, was it Sahadeva? I think it's Yudhishthira Maharaj who was worshipping Krishna. He couldn't see Krishna because his eyes were completely filled with tears. And the incredible ecstasy that he was experiencing in his heart, he was practically unable to perform that service. When a devotee experiences this kind of ecstasy, it is so clear that this is very, very different. And experiencing that bliss and that ecstasy, one completely shelter of Krishna consciousness. I don't need anything else. I don't want anything else. But the moment we commit offenses in our service, that is cut off from us. And not being able to experience that taste when we chant or hear is the cause of our seeking taste elsewhere. And that's why those who commit offenses, they leave Krishna consciousness gradually, or they drop their Krishna conscious practices and go elsewhere. For those who are staying in full-time service, it's very easily seen. They're here today and then suddenly unenthusiastic tomorrow. For those of us who live outside, it may appear that we're coming to the temple, but we can judge for ourselves. Is our taste in Krishna consciousness increasing? And if it is, it really means that we are able to more and more access Krishna's internal potency. But if that taste is disappearing, if that ability to see Krishna and things around us, that taste for service is not there, if it is not there, it means actually that we're moving away. That there's something in our practice which is causing an obstacle. It might be the quality of our hearing and chanting. It might be certain things that we're doing in the company of Vaishnavas, certain things we're saying, certain ways we make them feel. But we have to be very, very conscious of this point. As much as an athlete is conscious of every change in their body, a devotee becomes an athlete of their consciousness. Very, very careful to see slight and subtle changes in how they feel towards Krishna. So therefore, sometimes Bhaktivinoda Thakur would also say, the root cause of all of the offenses is inattentive chanting. Because from inattentive chanting, one loses that athlete-like focus on one's consciousness. And then other offenses are just like, okay, chalta, it's okay, it just happens. And so many things just happen. We're not even conscious of it. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur would say inattentive chanting is the mother or the cause, root cause of all other offenses. If we chant attentively, in our heart, Krishna will say, okay, this is a problem. We will start to think, why am I not getting taste in my chanting? And seeing these obstacles in front of us, we consciously start to make changes. Because the motivation is that incredible taste that comes from chanting Krishna's names. Text 26. Vedaham samatitani vartamanani charjana bhavishyani chabhutani mamta veda na kaschana. Translation.
O Arjuna, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I know everything that has happened in the past, all that is happening in the present, and all things that are yet to come. I also know all living entities, but me no one knows.
So in the previous verse, Krishna had said, they don't nabi janati loko mam ajam avyayam. I'm unborn and I never fall down. Made in the 4th chapter. That I know past, present and future. In other words, I don't change my body. I'm never born. I'm ajam. And I'm avyayam. I never fall down to this world. My omniscience, it shows the eternity of my form. It shows that I always exist as I am. Therefore, the impersonal form, my impersonal form, comes from my personal form. And Prabhupada makes this point in the purport. He says, here the question of personality and impersonality is clearly stated. If Krishna, the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, were Maya, material as impersonalists consider him to be, then like the living entity, he would change his body and forget everything about his past life. Anyone with a material body cannot remember his past life, nor can he foretell his future life, nor can he predict the outcome of his present life. Therefore, he cannot know what is happening in past, present, and future. Unless one is liberated from material contamination, he cannot know past, present, and future. Text 27. So, Arjuna is going to ask the question, why is it that so many people don't know you? And Krishna is going to answer. He will say, Ichchadvesha samuttena dvandva mohena bharata sarva bhutani sammoham sarge yanti parantapa. Translation.
Ocean of Bharata, all come from four. All living entities are born
that people actually don't wish to know me or don't come to know me is because they're caught up in the false presentation of Maya. They're satisfied with it. They think that this is good. This is what Maya is presenting to me. This is bad. By thinking in terms of good, bad, their entire life just in pushing things away from them that they don't want and pulling things towards them that they do want. This pushing and pulling occupies their entire consciousness, this life and for lifetimes. It prevents them from asking the question, is there something deeper than this? Is it just about, something coming, something going, something nice happening, something bad happening? Is there an underlying reality behind this? And because they're just completely confused here, they don't understand anything at all. And the intention or the background behind the reason for being caught up in good and bad is iccha and dvesha, desire and aversion. They're caught up in their own mind, so to speak. For one who's caught up in his own mind or her own mind, and therefore condition themselves to a particular way of thinking. Sometimes we say, I'm like this, so it's just natural. This is what I have to do. And whenever I would actually say this to my authorities, Prabhu, I'm like this. What do you want me to do? I would say this in ashram. My authorities would say, that's why you're practicing. If you define yourself in a particular box, you can never grow. So if you say, I am like this, it means you're actually an illusion, because you are not like this. This is your conditioning. You can say that, I'm trying, but I'm struggling. But if you say that I am like this, that actually shows that you don't even have the introspection to understand that you are something different, and you just think that what I'm doing is right. It's funny. It's actually really, really funny. We tend to think that the way we think is more correct than what other people are thinking. And it takes sometimes, and I've known myself, I pride myself on thinking, it takes a lot to convince me about something. But that's actually quite stupid. Because I just stand in the way of my own progress and growth. And this is a crucial step forward in spiritual life. If we can learn to trust the mind and intelligence of a superior more than our mind and intelligence, we are taught to see beyond just our likes and dislikes, and so therefore our conception of good and bad. If a superior tells us, no, this is good, even if I think it is bad, okay, I should at least try it. There may be some difficulty, I may not be able to do it completely, but let me at least try it. Taking that step forward in spiritual life allows us to come closer to Krishna. But as long as we stand at the door of the gate of self-change, and like a custodian, somebody comes and Prabhu, okay, chalo, just get out. We just say that to people. Nothing is ever going to happen. We can come to the temple for 30, 40 years, and it'll be like, and I've found myself saying this, I've come to the temple for 20 years or 15 years as a young child, and I know this, I know it used to be like this. And Ganeshan Prabhu once told me, You know, there are some elderly Indian men who come to the temple and they say, yeah, I know Krishna, we used to do this and we used to do that. He said, you're talking like them. You've just cut off all, your own self-progress. Like, oh yeah, and that's what I'm doing. But it's about, when we learn to trust another person's mind and intelligence more than our own, we actually pave the way for our own growth. So Krishna says, Ichcha Dvesha Samuttena, born of Ichcha and Dvesha, like and dislike, Dvandva Mohena Bharata. We are caught up in this Dvandva, in dualities. Sarva Bhutani Sammoham, which puts everybody into a delusion. In other words, this conception causes Maya, Krishna's energy, to cover them up. And they don't experience Krishna. Sarge Yanti Parantapa. And they're just born in this way. So Prabhupada says, the real constitutional position of the living entity is that of subordination to the Supreme Lord, who is pure knowledge. When one is deluded into separation from this pure knowledge, he becomes controlled by the illusory energy and cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The illusory energy is manifested in the duality of desire and hate. Due to desire and hate, the ignorant person wants to become one with the Supreme Lord and envies Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Why does Prabhupada say that? How does desire and hate contribute to this feeling? Yeah. I mean, this is the highest manifestation of desire and hate, by the way. What happens is that somebody who's trying to really enjoy this world, they go and they go at it and they try, even in a pious way. But at the end, when they face frustration, for one of three reasons, either they don't get what they want, they get what they want but it's a mixed blessing, or they get it but it's temporary. When they experience these three levels of frustration, at some point they just, they feel like, to H-E-double-L with all of this. I don't want it anymore. And that sense of aversion, Prabhupada says, causes them to really turn away from anything that's to do with matter. So it starts with desire, and it becomes a very strong sense of aversion. I don't want it. It's like, when we enter into a relationship and we go hard at a relationship and we are hurt badly. It's like, I don't care anymore. I don't want it. All men are useless, all women are like this, I don't want this anymore. Desire and hate, the highest manifestation of desire and hate, I mean, we have this all the time for many, many different things. But the highest manifestation of this causes people to just say, I don't want anything anymore. Krishna is a person, no, I don't want that anymore. Because if he's a person, then there'll be personal demands. And then I'll have to listen to somebody, I've been hurt too much for this. I just want nothing. And it's that sense that causes them to turn towards impersonalism. There's also a sense of, I don't want to be subordinate to anybody. I don't want to have to do that. I want, from that sense of enjoyment, the desire to be a controller, also comes a sense of, if I can't be a controller, let me go to a state where nobody's a controller. Everyone is just equal. Everyone is just one. So desire and hate. Desire and hate are the fundamental emotions that sit behind these conceptions. And if you really, there are people who kind of speak in personalist philosophy or Mayavad philosophy just off the tip of their tongue. They don't actually know what they're saying. But if you go to the heart of someone who's really fixed on this path, as an impersonalist or a Mayavadi, you dig into their heart, you will find frustration there. Either from, they may express themselves very calmly and peacefully, but you will find frustration there. Yeah, Prabhupada says that. So he says that Mayavadis, they speak about detaching themselves from this world, but after some time they feel lonely, and then they start to build hospitals to connect to people again. It shows the defeat of that philosophy. So Prabhupada actually speaks about this in the Nectar of Devotion. You may have heard that in Ganeshan Prabhu's presentation. He's in the Nectar of Devotion that desire and hate is like a pendulum. You can't really remain on one side or the other. But if one's desires are transformed into its original quality and it is satisfied in the original way, then there's no need for us to swing in this way. But for those who've been hurt like very badly, it can take a very long time. That's the other thing.
So what you suggest we're open to get it back on track and to the desire of Krishna?
They have to be able to experience Krishna in a way that they can take it. And assurances and experiences that Krishna will take care of me, he will always be there for me, is really important. I remember I was in Mayapur once, and Jananivas Prabhu, one of the very senior Vaishnavas there, was giving a class on Krishna kind of leaving the gopis and going. And I remember I was just taking darshan after the class of Radha Madhava, and there was a young girl, I think she must have come from somewhere in Europe, that her accent was like that, maybe Russia. And she went to Prabhu, Jananivas Prabhu, and asked him, Prabhu, you're speaking about Krishna running away from the gopis. How can I know that Krishna will not leave me and just leave me like that? And I was thinking, oh, I never thought that someone would take it in this way. But for such individuals, Krishna's protection, Krishna's presence with the devotees would need to be emphasized. We had one other Mataji this is a common example. Many, many people who have had very bad experiences in relationships, they often find it very difficult to take shelter. But they just need to be treated with a lot of patience, love, and affection. That's really the only way. The other way this can come about is, like Germany before Nazi Germany, was actually very, very submissive to authority. And that's one of the reasons they accepted Hitler's authority so completely. After Hitler came and went, Germans became extremely skeptical of authority. And Sachinanda Maharaj says that as soon as he saw that Prabhupada was on an asana, he had just entered the temple, and even though he was attracted by the kirtan, he was looking for spiritual life, the moment he saw that someone was placed on a vyasasana above everybody else, he was ready to turn and go. But then something in his mind kept him there and said, just try it out. And then he stayed. But I'm sure that many people have left for that reason. But the other consolation is that any slight touch they've had with service or devotional service will stay with them. And one day, when that wears off, then Krishna will bring them back at the appropriate time.
So that also, prior bodies or impersonators, can they come back? Or are they lost?
They can definitely come back.
Yeah, they're safe for devotees to keep a distance from impersonators.
Yeah.
Worldly people, but
yeah.
It has to come from them, or what's the...
It's very hard for it to come from them. But at the same time, for someone of my level, for example, I know that when I associate with my relatives who have this conception, I become like really disturbed. And so I just have learned to avoid those topics with them. One has to judge one's own level of strength in Krishna consciousness. One can try a little bit, but if one finds that someone is very strongly convinced, it's usually very hard unless they receive special mercy to go away. There's a case on this point. In Ramanuja's pastimes, there was someone called, I forget his name, was it Devarena Pandit or something? I think it was Devarena. But Ramanuja, as being, an exalted soul, practically an eternal associate of the Lord, he spent 19 days arguing Mayavad philosophy with this guy. For 19 days, this guy was coming up with argument after argument after argument. And Ramanuja was about to say, after like the 18th or something day, he was about to say, I can't, I have nothing to say to this person anymore. He was himself not disturbed, but he had just apparently lost all energy. And that night when he was sleeping, it was actually the deity, Sri Ranganath, who came to him and said, and he was actually talking to Ranganath in his sleep. Actually, before he went to sleep, he went to see the deities, and then he told the deities that I don't know what to say to this person anymore. I've tried everything I know. And that night when he was sleeping, Sri Ranganath came to him in his dream and said, you have not yet tried the arguments used by your spiritual master in such and such scripture. So tomorrow, go to him, speak those arguments, he will be defeated. And Ramanuja woke up that day, and the previous day he was like sagging, and Devarena had actually seen this. He had seen like this person was like, practically, and when you're talking to somebody and they lose energy, you're about to win. And he had seen him go in a defeated mood. That day, that morning, Ramanuja came and he was full of energy. And this person was like, oh my God, I saw him yesterday on the brink of defeat, and now he's come back like with so much more enthusiasm than I've seen him, so much more inspiration. I think I'm going to lose today. And I think it's because he's actually being divinely inspired. That was what touched him. He felt like this person is actually in touch with the Lord. Because nobody from that mood of despondency can come to such a level of enthusiasm without touch with transcendence. And from that experience, he thought, actually, no, I should surrender and I should learn from him. So before Ramanuja even spoke a word, he said, so let's talk. He said, no, I'm just taking shelter of you. I want to become your disciple. Then Ramanuja said, wait, let's finish that discussion. And then he spoke these arguments from Yamunacharya's words. This time, Devarena, he was hearing with a more submissive spirit. And those arguments hit him like arrows and changed his consciousness completely. Just a short while after that, like a month or two after that, some devotees came to Ramanuja. Devarena had become an initiated devotee, and he was very seriously practicing Krishna consciousness. And Ramanuja said, you go and take shelter of Devarena, become his disciples. Those devotees went to Devarena, and Devarena was displeased. He said, my spiritual master knows that I'm so full of pride. Why is he bringing these devotees to me? It'll just increase my pride even more. And I will reject my spiritual master if I do this. So he sent those devotees back, and Ramanuja was happy. But if someone is very strongly convinced like that, it really requires the touch of transcendence to change it. So therefore, devotees are advised to avoid it. Okay, text 28. Now this verse is going to describe who can actually know Krishna. Yesham tvantagatam papam jananam punya karmanam te dvandva moha nirmukta bhajante mam dridavratah. Translation.
Persons who have acted piously with that, and in this life, sinful actions are completely eradicated or achieved from the dualities of illusions, and they engage themselves in nice service.
So the phrase used here, punya karmanam, is important. So what does this phrase mean in your understanding? Does it mean, for example, what does the word punya mean? Karmanam. So what are examples? Karmanam means activities. Punya means pious activities. So can you give me examples of pious activities? Charity to whom? Huh?
Like when you give charity to Brahmanas.
Okay. Okay. So who are the Brahmanas today? Not very many. Like today, in today's world, what are the kind of charity we can give? We can give it to cancer organizations. We can give it to the bushfire. Is it that kind of charity that will give us the ability to understand Krishna? Okay. What are other types of pious activities?
Doing your duty, if you're a parent, being a good parent, fulfilling that duty.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. But does that give one Krishna?
So many people don't.
They don't.
Yeah.
And taking care of one's family properly is definitely pious. Does it give one Krishna always, though? I mean, you tend to notice that pious people are more receptive if they have the culture. Not always, but many times. But is every kind of good parent, do they feel attraction for Krishna? Not really. So then when Krishna says punya karmanam, that performing pious activities will allow one to transcend dualities, what does it mean? The Chaitanya Charitamrita describes that there are three types of pious activities. There's pious activity which gives one material enjoyment. There's pious activity that gives one renunciation. And there's pious activity that gives one bhakti. So the type of pious activity that gives one material enjoyment are things like, for example, helping people in need, or raising an orphan, taking care of one's family properly, being a good person, moral person. The kind of pious activities that help one in renunciation include, for example, performing certain austerities, worshipping those who are renunciates. What it means is that one gets the inclination for renunciation in one's own life. One acquires the inclination for renunciation even in the next life. And so you find that these individuals who've cultivated these type of pious activities that give one the inclination for renunciation, the moment they see someone who is more renounced, they start to go after that person. They feel like, I remember when I was a boy, I would see the color saffron and I would run after it. Or you would, there are many boys who do feel like that. Or you get, people who they see, brahmacharis living a very renounced life. They sleep on the floor, they eat very simply, they perform all kinds of austerity. And they're like, that's what I want. It's because they've come with those inclinations from the kind of activities, the pious activities they've performed previously. The third kind of activity, pious activity, are activities that give one impressions of bhakti. So one is like pious activity that gives one opportunities for material enjoyment and inclination even to act piously. Like if one comes in a family which donates very generously, through association with the family, one can develop that inclination. Or one can develop the inclination for renunciation, or by unconsciously or unknowingly serving the Vaishnavas, by somehow or the other unconsciously chanting Krishna's names or taking prasadam, one can unconsciously develop the impressions of bhakti. And when Krishna says punya karmanam, he's referring to this third category. So it is those pious activities that give one impressions of bhakti. Agyata sukriti is another term used to describe this. If one performs agyata sukriti, unknowing devotional service, agyata, so that's A-J-N-A-T-A, and there's a twiggle on top of the N, agyata. So yesham tvanta gatam papam jananam punya karmanam. So those who jananam, those of persons have performed pious activities, perhaps for lifetimes. Activities and acquiring very strong impressions of bhakti. They are completely done with any kind of material activity. Yesham tva antagatam papam, because it is sinful activities, or for that matter, even sometimes pious activities, that give one a material inclination. Like, for example, if I smoke a cigarette, alongside smoking a cigarette and getting lung cancer, I also increase my desire to smoke another cigarette. Similarly, performing sinful activities causes that inclination to rise in one's heart. But when the impressions of bhakti become strong because of agyata sukriti, and then one deepens those impressions by associating with devotees, and then one gets that conviction that I just need to serve Krishna and everything else will be served. This is another way of saying Vasudeva Sarvamiti. Yesham tvanta gatam papam jananam punya karmanam. So for those persons, perhaps after lifetimes of cultivating these impressions, they come to this conviction. Then te dvandva moha nirmukta. Nirmukta means they transcend, or they become free of just thinking in terms of what I like, what I dislike. Te dvandva moha nirmukta. And then what happens? Bhajante mam, they worship me, they serve me, dhrida vritaha, with extreme determination. They don't look here and there. And that reflects the state of the surrendered soul and the history that sits behind someone who's surrendered. If we see anybody who has that quality of surrender, that quality of faith, we should know that there's always a history behind it. Maybe we don't see the history in this life, but there is a history behind it. It is occasionally true that it happens just by special mercy, but that's more rare. It usually happens because of strong cultivation. What it means also for us is that if we cultivate that association, we cultivate those impressions, again, by associating with the superior, and we allow our heart to be open to self-change, we gather those impressions and mold our heart, then that strong conviction, I don't need anything else, develops. In fact, it can develop very quickly. Depends on the openness of our heart and our receptivity to those impressions and instructions. So, te dvandva moha nirmukta bhajante mam dridavata. They are freed from the dualities of delusion and they engage themselves in my service with determination. Vilas Manji Mataji had a question?
It's just a disciple asked this question in regards to this verse. I heard this in a lecture by my spiritual master, where he said, Prabhupada, I seriously did not have any pious activities before I met you. I was just taking drugs and, I really don't think there was a history of pious activities behind me, whether in this life or in the previous. And Prabhupada said, I created your pious activities so that you can engage in your pious service. I just wondered if you had any comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, the presence of a devotee, if you just look at Prabhupada, oh, here's a saintly man, and he looks like he's trying something good, that generates a pious activity. Or Swamiji, he seems like sincere, he seems learned. Just that comment creates pious activity. But you will also notice that there are different devotees, and some of them were attracted, but then may have, filtered away. And then, just kept coming, going. Yet there were others who just came and took it really strongly. And yes, for all of them, you need a devotee's presence like that. I mean, that caliber of devotee. But those who came to it and stuck to it really strongly, it does reflect that past history. And Prabhupada sometimes also said that, it's all my sons and daughters, they were sent by my Guru Maharaj to help me. Prabhupada said that too. So Prabhupada sometimes said, my spiritual master has sent all of you.
So that last point that you made, that when we open our heart to the superior, to the spiritual master, then we allow our heart to deeply imbibe more impressions.
Yes.
So is that a way someone could accelerate if they have very little pious activity, but they meet somebody like Shri and sort of learning and they really surrender, really open their heart, then is that process by which the acceleration, maybe what would normally take lifetimes of accumulating impressions of Bhakti may happen?
Very, very quickly. Yeah. And sometimes it's just a matter of being attached to Srila Prabhupada. So I remember, Govinda Mataji, she speaks about this in her book. She said, I was attracted to Bhakti, but I was attracted to Srila Prabhupada because he was the only father I ever had. And she would just love to do things for Srila Prabhupada all the time, everywhere. And that was her connection to Krishna consciousness. Even for Janaki Mataji, for that matter, when Prabhupada was there, she used to love to serve Srila Prabhupada, but not so much the other devotional activities. When Prabhupada was not there, she would not be as enthusiastic. But it was just that attachment that was sufficient, and that would just drag these devotees along. Sometimes Prabhupada compared it to a train. So I remember His Grace Bhurjan Prabhupada asked Srila Prabhupada, so Prabhupada, in your association, it feels like we're just going so fast, and we feel inspired and energetic in bhakti, but when you're not there, it feels like we're just struggling through a swamp. And then Prabhupada said, yes, it's like catching a train. Sometimes in India, people who are on a bicycle, they just catch hold of a bus and they just are taken away. But he said, dealing with the pure devotees like that, you just catch hold of them and you're just taken away. The difficulty is holding on. And that can sometimes be very difficult. I know for myself when I was in ashram, I was like, yes, I want to do this, I want to do this, and I was trying to hold on. But then it'd be like, it would be that constant struggle. To the extent that we're able to hold on, one can go really fast, really quickly. But usually, the process is a more gradual one. Not because of the strength of the devotee, but because of our ability to hold on. And that ability to hold on comes from past impressions, or how much we open ourselves to being trained. And it can be very hard at times, because we are so fixed in the conception of what is right for us, or what is wrong for us. And therefore we feel like, yes, this part I can take, this part I can't take. And when that barrier comes about, sometimes it can take a long time before we are able to cross a certain limitation that we have. But sometimes, Srila Prabhupada would also state that when the disciple is like this, the spiritual master catches hold of the disciple's hair and pulls him. Sometimes Prabhupada would get that explanation of the shika, he would say. So that's special mercy. It's really special mercy. Okay. So Prabhupada says in this purport, those eligible for elevation to the transcendental position are mentioned in this verse. For those who are sinful, atheistic, foolish, and deceitful, it is very difficult to transcend the duality of desire and hate. Only those who have passed their lives in practicing the regulative principles of religion, who have acted piously and who have conquered sinful reactions, can accept devotional service and gradually rise to the pure knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then gradually they can meditate in trance on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the process of being situated on the spiritual platform. This elevation is possible in Krishna consciousness in the association of pure devotees. For in the association of great devotees, one can be delivered from delusion. It is stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam that if one wants to actually be liberated, he must render service to the devotees. Mahat sevam dvaram ahur vimuktes. But one who associates with materialistic people is on the path leading to the darkest regions of existence. Tamodvaram yoshitam sangi sangam. So the second line means attachment to women or attachment to people who are attached to women. Attachment to materialistic women or attachment to people who are attached to materialistic women. Basically materialists. All the devotees of the Lord traverse this earth just to recover the conditioned souls from their delusion. Then persons do not know that forgetting their constitutional position as subordinate to the Supreme Lord is the greatest violation of God's law. Unless one is reinstated in his own constitutional position, it is not possible to understand the Supreme Personality or be fully engaged in his transcendental loving service with determination. So it is actually those those devotional impressions that allow one to identify oneself as being Krishna's servant. From that history, one feels, actually, no, Krishna is my master and I'm his servant. Just like when I feel I am so-and-so's father and so-and-so person is my son or daughter, then it becomes very natural to serve them. I don't feel like serving them as something exterior to me. Similarly, when I start to feel that I am Krishna's servant, and one even repeats this to oneself during the day, I am Krishna's servant and Krishna is my master. He is my eternal father. Then serving Krishna, chanting his names becomes the easiest of tasks. It doesn't feel like I'm doing something external to myself. This is who I am. And one just does it naturally. So, sometimes I used to think, I would read about the pastimes in Vrindavan, or I would hear of Lord Chaitanya's associates, particularly Lord Chaitanya taking his associates for Sankirtan every day. Now, my experience of Sankirtan always was that I would get very tired, especially it's really hot. And so when I was reading those Sankirtan pastimes, it would be like, okay, the devotees chant and dance and chant and dance for hours and hours and hours, and they're tired. Then I was thinking the next day they'd want to break, because I would want to break. But then the next day they go out again, and then the next day, then the next day, and the next day. I'd be like, oh, this is too much. I need a break. But those devotees, this is who they are. This is intrinsically who they are. And my level of identification is not that much. So therefore I struggle. whereas for them, they just do it naturally.
Everybody has a different, like, want to give service, way they want to do it.
Yeah.
It said, I like that, it said, all the devotees of the Lord traverse the earth just to recover the conditioned souls of their delusion. So everyone has their own way of doing it, like Harinam or Sankirtan, give lectures, distributing books, do something different.
Yes.
But if you're doing something that is not like, you get into it, you get involved, you hope that people get involved. If they did see a Harinam, we were at Sacred Sound, we had the Krishna village, and some people that were non-devotees, they were coming up and they really got into it, and it was really nice to see. They just let themselves go, got into the music and chanting the holy name, and they just let themselves open to it, which was nice to see. And others were looking for something else. They were looking to go to the temple, listen to Srimad Bhagavatam, and they like that too. It depends on your inclination as well, the personality.
Partially, the reason is that, yes, the spiritual master, Prabhupada says, looks at the disciples' inclinations and engages them accordingly. But from the disciples' point of view, they are trying to take guidance from the spiritual master. So everything in Krishna consciousness is offered as a package. There's some chanting, there's some reading, there's some Harinam, there's some serving in a particular way. And Prabhupada would sometimes explain it to be like going to a physician. So sometimes when you go to a doctor will say, oh, you come from so-and-so part of the world, I know you can't give up this type of food, so maybe eat pasta, but eat it in this way, the doctor will say. But as a patient, I can't go to the doctor and say, doctor, I want to eat pasta, tell me how to eat pasta so I don't get sick. Because then I limit my own recovery. So as a patient, I go to a doctor asking, okay, you tell me to do something, I'll do it. And if the doctor says eat rice all day long, I'll be like, I'll try, but I'm going to really struggle. The doctor will say, okay, I get that. So you eat rice, then you eat a little bit of pasta at the end. But from our side, we should be as much trying to take in. Yeah, follow the prescription. And that's very personal. But if we fashion our own package, we limit our growth. That's the problem. Okay. So now from text 29 and text 30, Krishna is going to mention a sixth type of devotee. Previously he had spoken about 3 types of karma mishra bhaktas. Does anybody remember who they were? Mixed bhakti. Artha, the distressed. The artharthi, the one desiring wealth. And the jigyasur, the one who's curious. And he was looking for a long-term solution to both suffering and to gain something in this world. But we also discussed the Jnana Mishra Bhakta, who doesn't have material desire, but retains some level of austerity, some level of, those impressions of renunciation, of detachment, that is mixed along with his surrender to Krishna. And we discussed how the 3 types of karma mishra bhaktas, they attain the other 4 kinds of liberation. They don't attain a relationship with Krishna in as a lover, as a parent, as a friend, or as a servant. We discussed how the Jnana Mishra Bhakta attains Shantaras, but not the 4 higher rasas of the relationship of a parent, lover, friend, and servant. Now, another type of Karma Mishra Bhakta is being described. They are called Yoga Mishra Bhaktas. The difference between the Yoga Mishra Bhakta and the other types of Bhaktas is the Yoga Mishra Bhakta is trying to leave this world. The Jnana Mishra Bhakta is actually not trying to leave this world. They've already left this world. They're liberated from that point of view. They have no more connection with this world, but they retain some elements of their previous practice, their element of renunciation or austerity. The Yoga Mishra Bhaktas are actually trying to actively achieve a destination. That is their desire. So these individuals, they attain Salokya, the same planet as the Lord. But because they're not serving Krishna only for the sake of a relationship, their surrender is partial. They're taking shelter of Krishna and Bhakti predominantly, but they retain a conception of what they want to do in this world. And so they're called Yoga Mishra. We had discussed were people who retain a desire to remove suffering, retain a desire to gain things in this world, or they inquire as a long-term solution to gaining something or relieving distress. The Yoga Mishra Bhakta is actually trying to achieve some tangible target. Who here missed these distinctions? I know you may have. Anyone else? Yoga Mishra Bhakta?
I think this might be the last one, please.
Okay. So just as a brief recap, chapter 7 speaks about knowledge of Krishna, which causes surrender, and the specific knowledge of Krishna, which causes pure bhakti. So, knowledge of Krishna, that Krishna is actually everything I need, is everything I need, and I don't need anything else. That is a result of this knowledge. The knowledge is that Krishna is everything, and the faith is I don't need anything else. So this is the knowledge. And this is the resultant faith. So this whole chapter describes people who worship Krishna, who understand this to different degrees. So in that verse 7:15, we spoke about 4 kinds of people. We spoke about the one who is distressed, the artha, the artharthi, one who wants material things, and a jigyasur, the one who inquires as a long-term solution for these problems. And we spoke about the jnani. Now, the jnani was somebody who is aloof from the material world, but retains elements of renunciation, seclusion, etc. So these people as a concept, and we can discuss this like in more detail for those who've missed this separately, but these people yes, they understand that Krishna is everything, but they've accepted it to a less degree, to a lower degree, than those who have just completely said Krishna is everything. I don't need anything in this world because Krishna is everything. Whatever experiences that I have, I can get it in Krishna. So you would say some part that you couldn't read? Jigyasur. He inquires as a long-term solution to remove distress or gain material things. And then you have the jnani, who's aloof from the material world, but he retains elements of renunciation, seclusion, private study, contemplation of scriptures, intellectually, etc. All of these people, they have understood that I need to worship Krishna. But that faith that Krishna is all that I need is not fully there in their heart. So because they don't have that, they're not able to just serve Krishna only for the sake of a relationship. They don't fully have the faith that by worshipping Krishna, every other purpose will be accomplished. One who has this level of faith enters the path of pure bhakti. So chapter 7 provides this knowledge of Krishna so that we can take shelter of him in this way. That I just need to take shelter of Krishna and everything else will be achieved. And one who surrenders, in other words, one develops this quality of faith, they can just worship Krishna to please Krishna. They don't need to feel like, well, if I worship Krishna, what about me? Who will take care of me? That feeling, that sense of, I still need something separate from service. That will not be there. So these individuals are people who feel, I need something separate from my service. And because they feel that, they do achieve liberation, but they don't achieve a relationship in the four rasas. That is, Sakya, Vatsalya, Madhurya, and Dasya. They achieve the four kinds of liberation higher than impersonal liberation. Sastri, Samipya, Sarupya, and Salokya. The same planet as the Lord, same opulence as the Lord, same form as the Lord, etc. The Jigyasurs, the Shaunaka Rishi, so the devotees who were asking Sutta Goswami for a solution to the problems of Kali Yuga. So at the beginning of Bhagavatam, you have the sages at Naimisharanya who are sitting in front of Sutta Goswami and are asking them.
In today's world.
It would be anyone who's asking for spiritual life, but who's asking, well, I need to know, how does this work? Who am I? And they're asking these questions not from the point of view of developing love for Krishna. They're asking these questions to understand, well, this is my experience in this world. How do I, remove the suffering that I have? And how can I make for myself a better position in this world?
That would include impersonalists who are sort of inquiring as to where
But they don't have to be impersonalists to inquire. Impersonalist is someone who their inquiry leads them down that path. But someone who inquires more deep, these are people who just come to the temple, I'm facing this problem, how do I get rid of it? But these people don't come with just like that. They don't come with just an immediate problem. They recognize that their problems are more long-term. There's more introspection involved. And so therefore they begin to ask questions in order to solve their problems on a more long-term scale. That's the difference. And now the fifth type of mixed devotee, these people are called Karma Mishra Bhaktas. Yeah, all of them. They're called Karma Mishra Bhaktas. They're devotees because they principally worship Krishna, but their bhakti is Karma Mishra, is mixed with karma. The Jnani here is called Jnana Mishra Bhakta because yes, he worships Krishna predominantly, but it is mixed with elements of jnana, and the jnani achieves shantaras. They have no connection with matter, but they achieve shantaras because their sense of that complete intimate relationship of serving Krishna simply for Krishna's pleasure is not there. The four Kumaras. And finally, now Krishna, in these last two verses of the 7th chapter, is going to mention a fifth type of mixed devotee, that is the Yoga Mishra Bhakta. The Karma Mishra Bhakta wants to get something in this world. The Jnana Mishra Bhakta has nothing to do with this world, but just has elements of jnana mixed in their practice. The Yoga Mishra Bhakta wants to achieve a destination. So that's why the Yoga Mishra is included. Well, you have the Karma Mishra, Jnana Mishra, Yoga Mishra, 3 types. But you can get different varieties in those categories. But the principal point to take from here is that there are different devotees who still feel like they need something other than worshipping Krishna to be happy. And as long as that conception is there in a small way or a big way, they are not yet on the path of pure bhakti. So therefore this chapter speaks about demigod worshippers. They're way lower than these guys. Because they feel like I need something completely separate from Krishna. I don't even want to go to Krishna. Or the impersonalists, they feel like Krishna is not even real. It's just impersonal Brahman. And so they're not with Krishna at all. So this whole chapter reflects the knowledge that gives one full surrender and different devotees who take this knowledge to different levels. And it shows us what the level is, or what the level of realization is that allows us to enter the path of pure bhakti. That's what's happening here. They're all three are spoken of. Karma Mishra, Jnana Mishra, and Yoga Mishra Bhaktas. They're described in brief. But the important thing for us to understand is that to the extent that we have some conception that I need something separate from Krishna, I fall in these three categories. And for our personal life, it doesn't really matter what category we fall into. What's important is we recognize that that impression is there. And the way to cure that is to focus on hearing from those who have that complete faith. When we hear from them, we understand, actually, no, I don't need these things. I just need to serve Krishna and everything else will be taken care of. But a spiritual master, Prabhupada says, is defined as somebody who gives a devotee faith in this idea. And so therefore allows them to surrender and walk the path of pure bhakti. The path of pure bhakti starts right from now, not from, at some stage. So to say, to become a pure devotee, that's neither here nor there. The point more is, are we walking the path of pure bhakti? One who's walking the path of pure bhakti is practicing pure devotional service. And he is a pure devotee, even if he has material desires. But the faith is there. If I just serve Krishna, everything else will be taken care of. My desires will be taken away. Every experience that I want will be satisfied. The text 28 describes how one surrenders to Krishna. So this describes the pure devotee. So, yes. Yes. It's the one who's completely surrendered. So, it's completely surrendered.
So not the 3 times?
No. Because there it says, Yesham tvanta gatam papam. All the sinful impressions are destroyed. So they don't have any remaining desires to fulfill in this world. They don't have this conception. The things that motivate them to feel like I need something else, that's disappeared. Because their impressions of bhakti are so strong. And it really only comes in association with great devotees.
So is that the link between
Yes, yes.
and coming to what text 28 says, is the association with
Yes. So text 28 is the key to achieving the realization in text 19. And you can take it as that link. So in that sense, this verse is extremely important.
And another question is, do these 3 types, I think it's a little confused about this, you're giving examples of how they achieve different levels of liberation, and it sounds as though that's final, but
If they maintain that conception, that's the result. But if they associate with great devotees and that changes, then the result changes. Because it's really like, can I rub this off? Anybody else needs this?
Sorry, you said text 28 is the key to realization of text 19.
Yes. I'll explain that in just a minute. So, it's like, if this scale reflects intimacy of relationship with Krishna, if someone is maintaining a sadhana at this level of intensity, the goal is kind of determined. But if at some point here, suddenly their intensity changes by association, then they achieve a deeper level of intimacy with Krishna. And it can change at any time. Even here, it can be like, oh, okay. And that's actually what happened to Bharat Maharaj in the 5th canto. So our acharyas say he didn't actually fall down just like that. What Krishna noticed was that his level of practice, his level of intensity is taking him here. So the Krishna thought, I'm going to do something to him that makes him even more intense. And then he caused him to forget for a brief amount of time. Then Maharaj Bharat was like, oh my God, what have I done? I've lost my plot. And then he became deadly serious. And his level of intensity sharpened so much that his relationship with Krishna became far more intimate as a result.
So that period of forgetting was as a deer and when ramped up.
No, when he had the deer as Bharat Maharaj. As a deer, he was fully cognizant. But Krishna wanted that result. Same with Narada Muni, actually. Krishna appeared as a brief glimpse in Narada Muni's heart, and he said, "You're not yet qualified to see me." That was not technically speaking correct, because Narada had awakened prema. But Krishna wanted his practice to increase in intensity. So he appeared briefly and tantalizingly disappeared.
So to understand those three, as Krishna's explained, these are the different classifiers of association. And to understand that in that class, somewhere along that path, Krishna will intervene to keep down association with devotees.
Krishna doesn't intervene if there are other elements of practice. For example, if they are karma mishra bhaktas, they are still relying on their prescribed duties a little bit. If they're jnana mishra bhaktas, they're still relying on other things a little bit. And yoga mishra bhaktas, and we will see in the 8th chapter that they still practice elements of yoga. But if one with material desire completely goes to Krishna and engages in the 9 processes of bhakti, desiring material benefit or liberation, for such a devotee, Krishna personally gets involved, and then he gives them their desire in such a way that they realize that what I wanted was nothing compared to what an intimate relationship with Krishna can be like. That's the case of Dhruva Maharaj. So this is explained in the 5th canto. Ichchapidanam nijapatapala. It's a very famous verse, actually. But therefore the recommendation of Bhagavatam is akama sarva kamava moksha kama udaradi tivrena bhakti yogena. So that verse says akama, whether you have no material desire as a devotee, whether you have sarva kama, all material desire as partial devotee or otherwise, or moksha kama, you desire liberation. Tivrena bhakti. So tivra bhakti doesn't mean the kind of bhakti where you do something like your prescribed duties and you offer it to Krishna. Tivra bhakti means you focus on the 9 processes of bhakti. It's a direct, intense, intimate relationship with Krishna. So the Bhagavatam says, if you do this, you will get your desire, and this is better. And then later on the Bhagavatam explains that if you do this, Krishna will personally, forcibly give you his lotus feet. Whether you like it or not, Krishna will force his lotus feet on you. And then when you get that taste, then you'll be like, I was looking for broken pieces of glass. But for those who don't have that reliance on devotional service, on direct devotional service to Krishna, then they don't get such mercy. Mataji? It happens through association with great devotees. So there are 2 things that are needed. One is association, but 2, how deeply we take that association. We take the impressions of the devotee's bhakti into our hearts. So this is explained by Prahlad Maharaj. He says to Hiranyakashipu, Neisha matis tavad urukramangrim. He says, until you bathe yourself in the dust of the lotus, you remember this verse? Until you bathe yourself in the dust of the lotus feet of the devotee, he says your mind can never actually go towards Krishna. And our acharyas say that this bathing of the dust, it means taking on the very Vaishnavatva, the very state of someone being a Vaishnava, of a great soul being a Vaishnava. You take everything that they have, all their feelings, their way of viewing the world, and you just imbibe it into your heart. You start to see the world as they see it. This is why we unconsciously ask, so what did Maharaj say when he came to this situation? How did this devotee react? We unconsciously ask these questions because the bhakti in our heart is seeking that nourishment. But the more we imbibe into our heart the way senior Vaishnavas, particularly devotees, who are so intense, how they view the world, if we imbibe that into our heart, then the intensity shoots up considerably. So the association has to be there and we have to actively take it. And this part about taking association is usually a function of past impressions. It helps a lot. Sometimes we can get forcible mercy. Like Abhiram Thakur, he would have a whip. He was Lord Nityananda's associate. He would just go and hit people with a whip. Anyone who was touched with his whip developed prema bhakti. So that's like extraordinary mercy. But that's not the usual process. Devotees' bhakti into our hearts. How deeply we take the impressions of the devotees' bhakti into our hearts, or of the great devotees.
So text 28, the key to realization to text 19, I can't see the link.
Because understanding that Vasudeva Sarvamiti, that Krishna is everything, it depends on, here, the association that we take.
You mentioned text
I know, text 28.
Yeah.
But then also how deeply we take that association. Now, how deeply we take that association is influenced by the strength of those impressions. Like if I come, from with many impressions of bhakti, I'm just ready. Prabhupada would sometimes give the example of like a dry piece of grass. I can be a dry piece of grass or a wet piece of grass, and the fire can be equally applied to the wet or the dry grass.
Yeah, but text 19 says, after many births, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders to me, knowing me to be.
But what is the realization? Vasudeva Sarvamiti,
Yeah.
that Krishna is everything.
Yeah, that's the text 19.
So that is the realization that these devotees have, the great devotees whose association we are taking. So the question is, in their association, why do some people get that level of realization and others only are able to take it partially? The answer is, to the extent that we retain our own conceptions of like and dislike, we are not allowed to take that realization completely.
Because of past impressions.
Well, because of our retaining our material conceptions. But those who have acquired devotional impressions by serving such great devotees or by accumulating such devotional impressions over lifetimes, perhaps, then they associate with such devotees, they see this depth of their conviction, and they're just ready to take it up immediately.
So when you say how deeply we take the impressions, you're saying it's influenced by the strength of the impressions.
No, we are saying that the impressions, if they're strong, it's helpful, and how readily we are there to... Because it's like, how does a fire start? A fire starts depending on the intensity of the fire or the readiness of the grass. If the grass is very, very wet, like if you put fire on water, then that fire is usually, it won't touch the water. But if, for example, the fire is ablaze, so like Lord Chaitanya, when he would chant and dance, he would dry up all the water that was there and set anything on fire. But when we associate with great devotees, the fire is there, but our readiness in terms of how dry we are as grass will determine how intensely and how quickly we acquire that realization. Malobika Mataji had another question?
Sorry to take you backward. So three Mishra Bhatas, Gyan, Karma and Yoga. In Karma Mishra Bhakta, you already explained the four different categories. So
Well, three different categories. The Artha, Arthati and Jnani. Sorry, Artha, Arthati and Jigyasur.
So Jnani comes under?
Jnana Mishra Bhakta. The Jnani actually in that verse can mean two things. It can mean the Jnana Mishra Bhakta. It can also mean someone who has realized knowledge that Krishna is everything. That verse, it can mean both things. And so the first explanation is the Jnana Mishra Bhakta. The second explanation is the surrendered or pure soul.
Which verse is it?
That's verse 15. Chatur vidyabhajante mam jana sukritino arjuna. Or 16 actually, sorry, verse 16.
Okay. And so my question is, Prabhu, can you also describe, or can you also say there are different types of Jnana Mishra Bhakta and Yoga Mishra Bhakta?
Well, I mean, there are different perhaps practices they may imbibe, but usually I have not seen a broad description of different categories.
It's not in chapter 7.
It's not in chapter 7. You don't get different categories mentioned there.
Okay, so only three different yoga mishra bhaktas.
3 different Karma Mishra Bhaktas, 1 type of Jnana Mishra Bhakta, and the Yoga Mishra Bhakta. So 5 types of mixed devotees are mentioned. The 1 pure devotee is mentioned, so that's 6 types of devotees. Then 2 types of non-devotees are mentioned, who worship the demigods and who are impersonalists. But then, actually, these are elaborated on later on the 7th chapter, with those who worship the demigods and those who consider Krishna to be formless. But then in verse 7:15, 4 types of non-devotees who do not take shelter of Krishna at all are described. That's the verse Namam Dushkritino Mudha. Mudha, Naradhama, Maya Paritagyana, Asuram Bhavam Ashrita. So these 4 types of people, even after reading the scriptures, they don't take in the conception that Krishna is everything. So the Mudha is the demigod worshipper, the Asura Bhava is the impersonalist, and the Maya Aparita Jnana is someone who's a philosopher, but they do not take shelter of Krishna. They retain other conceptions of what philosophy should orient itself to. And then you have the second category, Naradhama, who take on the element of culture, of philosophy, but they expand that into just like material social activities. The Naradhama. For those who have missed it, after the class we can spend 10 minutes or so going through those categories. I'll describe it in more detail. But as a concept, this 7th chapter speaks about the degrees to which people take shelter of Krishna. And you get some people referenced in 7:15 who don't take shelter of Krishna at all. And that includes, as was described later on, the demigod worshippers and the impersonalists. And then you get 5 categories of mixed devotees who predominantly take shelter of Krishna with something else on the side. And then you get the pure devotee. And of course, if you had to put, so I'll just write this down. Where's the duster? If you had to put it down this way, if you had to draw a line like this, which reflects surrender to Krishna, so here you have at the highest level the pure devotee, or the one practicing the path of pure bhakti. Now here, somewhere here, you have the mixed devotees. So this is the Karma Mishra, Jnana Mishra, etc. Jnana Mishra, Yoga Mishra. At the category of people who do not surrender to Krishna at all, here are the demigod worshippers and Mayavadis. Now, in the first 6 chapters, we saw the Nishkama Karma Yogi. They are here, in this category here. They have taken shelter of Krishna partially, but they retain a lot of what they feel they still need to do outside of bhakti. And those who, if this is the middle point, say the 50% point, anyone on this side, because they're predominantly practicing bhakti, therefore they're called bhaktas. Just like, for example, if you are a farmer and you're selling something, if the farming is more prominent, you're called a farmer. If your selling is more prominent, you're called like a grocer. So you can be called a farmer who's a grocer also, or a grocer who does some farming on the side. So these people are people who practice karma with bhakti on the side to assist their karma. But these people are devotees who practice a little bit of karma, jnana, or yoga on the side. And that's the distinction. And so all of these categories from this side to here, you can represent them on a scale of intensity of relationship with Krishna. Those who are here, demigod worshippers, it's like a flat line. There's nothing that they don't go towards Krishna at all. The Nishkama Karma Yogi may be something like this. The mixed devotees may be something like this. And the pure devotees are like this. And of course, even amongst the pure devotees, you get gradations. You get those who worship Krishna as you do in Vaikuntha, then those you do for Dwaraka, then Mathura, and then Vrindavan. Even among the devotees in Vrindavan, you have different degrees of intimacy. So it's an ever-increasing scale. But the principle is the intimacy and intensity of the practice increases the result in terms of an intimate relationship with Krishna. That is the overall idea. And of course, we can speak in technical terminology, but the concept is, to the extent that we are able to see Krishna is everything, and I just need to worship Krishna, then that's achieved. And you see this in the Shikshashtakam also. Like if you see the second verse of Shikshashtakam, where it says, "Oh Lord, you're so merciful that you come as your holy names, but I'm so unfortunate that I'm not able to chant them." So that reflects a devotee who's struggling, who's trying. But then you see the devotee who is Ashlishyava Padaratam Pinashtamam. Whether you trample upon me or go off with someone else, you leave me bereft of your association, I am still your servant, because you're my master and nothing's going to ever change that. That depth of surrender is what gives that intensity. You look at someone like the Pandavas and Draupadi. Like imagine if you were serving under a boss who allowed you to go through that experience to teach the world something. How would you feel? Abused, right? The interesting thing is Krishna went to the forest where the Pandavas were. And he said, when you were going through the gambling match, I was fighting Shalva. Shalva had attacked Dwaraka at the same time. And he said, had Shalva not attacked Dwaraka, I would have been there and I would have stopped this. If necessary, I would have killed the Kauravas. Now the Pandavas know that Krishna is Paramatma in everyone's heart. And it's not that if he's in one place, he can't be anywhere else. They never once asked him, why were you not there? That sense of implicit faith in Krishna, whatever you did, it was right. They did ask, Krishna, how could this have happened? What about this, what about that? But they never once blamed Krishna. So sometimes it is said that a surrendered soul doesn't feel the need to understand Krishna's plans, but they understand that Krishna is working in some way.
Why didn't they ask Krishna to come with them?
Why should they?
Why didn't they?
Because they just understood to be, and there's a whole pastime behind this. But when Yudhishthira Maharaj was putting Draupadi on the dais, even when he was putting his own brothers on the dais, he was thinking, I'm being forced by my duty to do this. I can't stop gambling because my superiors have bound me to this game. But through this duty, if Krishna allows me to win, I will understand that he doesn't want to lose his devotees. But if I lose them, it is actually Krishna's will. So he was seeing what Krishna's will was. And the thing is that as we perform our duties in this world, we come to know what Krishna's desire is for us. It's like, suppose I lose my job. Oh, it is Krishna's will, I'm not going to do anything, I'm going to sit like a potato at home and not do anything. I don't actually know what does Krishna intend for me for the next, so many years. But if I try for a job in a reasonable way, according to Krishna's instructions, and I don't get anything, then I understand it's Krishna's will. If I try and I get it, it's Krishna's will.
That bhakti leads to some destination, or because there's some past time when the Lord appears to Bhakta to ask, when they again ask, I don't need, I need only bhakti. Is that the only process? Or
That is the path of a pure bhakta. So,
when the pure bhakta is asked, what do you want? Because I need only bhakti, or I don't need anything.
yeah.
I don't need even prayer.
Yeah, so then Krishna takes them and makes them his own associate. He says, well, you don't want anything that I can give you, so take me.
So pure bhakti remains process only. Process.
No. They get Krishna. The pure devotee is asking for service to Krishna. He wants a relationship. It's like, for example, if I tell my parents, if I'm massaging their feet, for example, and they say, so what do you want? I say, I want a car. Or what I'm saying is, I want to keep massaging your feet. What does that say? No. The pure bhakta will say, I want to keep massaging your feet. What it means is, I want a relationship with you. Give me more and more a relationship with you. Give me service, because that's how I can connect with you. A pure devotee wants a relationship. As much as, for example, you do something for your spouse or for your children, and you only want their love in return. You only want that relationship with them in return. A devotee wants a relationship with Krishna. Therefore, when a devotee doesn't ask for anything, Salokya Samipya, this is verse, Apyuta, this is verse by Kapaladev. He says, my devotees don't even ask for the 4 kinds of liberation. Because, at the end, I'm just forced to say, you don't want anything I can give you? You don't want anything of this world? No. You don't want liberation that many yogis aspire for? No. You don't even want my opulences, my own form? No. What do you want? Your service. Then Krishna says, I'm in your debt. There's nothing that I can give you to repay what you have done for me. So the only thing I can say is, take me. I am now yours. And be satisfied with the ecstasy that you derive in service to me. Because there's nothing else I can give you. And that's the only thing a devotee wants. You should read about this in the prayers of Prahlad Maharaj. He describes this in detail. And you can also read about this in Madhurya Kadambini, at the end, where Krishna, in the level of prema, when Krishna appears before the devotee and how he responds. I think there's a conversation between Hanuman and Sri Ramachandra also in the Ramayana. Maybe it was Ramcharitramanas, actually it's mentioned. Sri Ramachandra asks Hanuman, after all this service, take liberation. Hanuman said, well, if liberation means I lose my service to you, then I'm quite happy here. Because all Hanuman wanted was to be Sri Ramachandra's servant, and that's all he wants. So we say that a devotee is satisfied with the process because the process is the end goal anyway. The process is developing a relationship with Krishna. The end goal is still functioning in that relationship. Like the process of developing love for one's child is to take care of them. Why? Because I want to continue to take care of them. When you have love for them, you take care of them, except with love. That's it. Okay. Let's finish chapter 7. Text 29. So Krishna is now going to speak about the Yoga Mishra Bhakta who wants to achieve a destination, particularly liberation in this world. Jaram marana mokshaya mama shritya yatantiye te brahma tadvidu krishnam adhyatmam karma chakilam. Translation.
Intelligent persons who are endeavoring for liberation from old age and death take refuge in me in devotional service. They are actually Brahman because they entirely know everything about transcendental activity.
So, Krishna is saying that these Yoga Mishra Bhaktas, they know who Brahma is. There's Brahma. What is this Brahma? What is this spiritual this transcendental subject matter? They know what Adhyatma is. They know what Karma is. In this purport, Srila Prabhupada summarizes the 7th chapter. He says, 4 kinds of impure devotees who engage themselves in the transcendental service of the Lord achieve their respective goals. And by the grace of the Supreme Lord, when they are fully Krishna conscious, they actually enjoy spiritual association with the Supreme Lord. But those who are worshippers of demigods can never reach the Supreme Lord in his supreme planet. Even the less intelligent, Brahman realized persons cannot reach the supreme planet of Krishna, known as Goloka Vrindavan. Only persons who perform activities in Krishna consciousness, mama shritya, taking shelter of Krishna, are actually entitled to be called Brahman because they're actually endeavoring to reach the Krishna planet. Such persons have no misgivings about Krishna, thus they are factually Brahman. Of course, it's not an answer to this point of what Brahma in this verse is. That's Prabhupada's summary of the 7th chapter. So, Prabhupada here is saying, or the verse is saying, these individuals know Brahma, they know Adhyatma, they know Karma. So 3 terms have been included. Arjuna is going to ask questions about what these 3 terms mean in the 8th chapter. And Prabhupada at the end of this purport says, those who are engaged in worshipping the form or archa of the Lord, or who are engaged in meditation on the Lord simply for liberation from material bondage, also know by the grace of the Lord the purport of Brahman, Adibhuta, etc., as explained by the Lord in the next chapter. So then in verse 30, the Lord is going to define 4 additional terms that that such a Yoga Mishra Bhakta needs to know. Sadi bhutadi daivam mam sadi yagyam cha ye vidu prayana kale picha mam te vidur yukta chetasaha. So they know, translation.
Those in full consciousness of me, who know me, the Supreme Lord, to be the governing principle of the material manifestation of the demigods and of all the methods of sacrifice, can understand and know the Supreme Personality of God, even at the time of death.
So Adi Bhuta, they know what Adi Bhuta is, they know what Adi Daiva is, they know what Adi Yagya is. And remembering me at the time of death, if those who know all of these things at the time of death, prayana kale picha mam, te vidur yukta chetasaha. They can know me even at the time of death.
So what are the 4 terms? You said Adi Bhuta, Adi Deva, Adi Yagya.
It's a good point. I thought there were 4 terms. There are 6 terms that are defined here. My mistake. Janana Marana Moksha, Te Brahma, Adhyatmam, Karma. I think in chapter 8, Aksharam Brahma, Subhava Adhyatmam, 3 and 4, 5, 6. Yes, sorry, 6 terms that are being described. So you're right. Adi Bhuta, Adi Daivam, Adi Yagyam. Now the word Adi means to govern over. So Prabhupada translates this Adi Bhuta as the governing principle of material manifestation. The Bhuta actually means the body. So what is the governing principle of living entities? Adi Daivam, what is it that governs all the demigods? Adi Yagyam, what is it that governs sacrifices? In the previous verse, Adi Atman, what is it that is actually governing the Atma itself? So the Yoga Mishra Bhakta, because he's dealing with a process, Krishna is saying awareness of this terminology and an incorporation of these elements in their practice allows them to identify me and remember me specifically at the time of death. And in the 8th chapter, we'll see why that's the case. Okay, chapter 8. Yes, I thought we could just briefly discuss these verses, if that's okay. So, chapter 7 was called Vijnana Yoga, or knowledge of the Absolute. Chapter 8 is called Taraka Brahma Yoga in Sanskrit. Taraka means to transcend. Taraka Brahma, so one who transcends this world and enters into the spiritual world. That process is described in chapter 8. And it's in response to Arjuna's question about certain terminology. Krishna explains this terminology that this devotee needs to know, and then he begins to describe the process that this devotee follows. Interspersed in this chapter, however, Krishna also indicates the path of elevation for the pure devotee, the one who's completely surrendered unto him. Okay, let's start. Now, this chapter is actually broken into 3 sections. From text 1 through to, I believe, 11. Sorry. 1 through to 8, sorry. Krishna answers Arjuna's questions. Then from text 9 through to, I believe, text 23. Krishna describes the process of achieving him through one, Yoga Mishra Bhakti, and through the path of pure Bhakti. Text 23. Through to 28. Krishna describes the two paths out of this world, or the two paths of elevation, rather. Elevation. So there's one path that leads to Swarga, so-called the path of night,